Hello, everyone. Welcome. I am Jan Mercer-Doms, the Vice President of U.S. Development with Join Mayshad. We are an ecosystem of brands for women by women, connecting women to each other and to the companies, causes, and organizations that champion equity for women professionally and personally. Please join us at joinmayshad.com to learn all about our upcoming shows, our workshops, our brain trust, and how you too can become a member of this new exciting world that we forge through together, creating opportunities for change, reinvention, and pivoting. We are thrilled to announce today on our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion show, our very special guest, Dr. Tana Sessions. Hi, Tana, welcome.
Hi, Jan. Thanks for having me.
You're so welcome. Tana is an award-winning international speaker, best-selling author, and certified executive performance strategist. She's the author of the best-selling book, Get Your Career Life in Order, and has contributed articles for various publications, including Forbes, Recruiter.com, and BlackEnterprise.com. She's a featured guest on numerous television shows, talk radio, and podcasts. She's been named Top Diversity and Business Leader by Forbes, Top 10 Company Culture Consultant by Fawn.com, and Top Female Expert to Follow by Huffington Post. She's also the new author, and I can't wait to talk about this, of her new book, Working While Black, A Woman's Guide to Stop Being the Best Kept Secret. So exciting. Welcome and congratulations on your new book.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited about it.
So, let's just jump right in. I know that your client profile includes many, many people who look like they have it all together, but yet inside know that they're playing small. What do you mean by this?
So oftentimes we have this imposter syndrome, right? And women and people of color in particular suffer from it more than others, where you show up and you look your best and you have this title and this maybe even this corner office, or you have this outwardly looking successful business. But inside, you know that you're not really living up to your purpose, your full potential. For whatever reasons, you have things that are blocking you. It could be past trauma, it could be bad experiences, and it could just be that imposter syndrome where you feel like, oh, if I put myself out there too much, people are going to question me, or they may ask me a question I don't have the answer to, and then they won't believe me, or they won't trust me as this credible professional or subject matter expert. And I can only speak from that because of my own experience. So I know how to recognize it and identify it, and also how to triage it when I work with my clients.
So that must create, and we talk about this a lot too at Mayshad, because our network is a group of corporate executives, business owners, entrepreneurs. And for many of us, we've reinvented once, twice, maybe 10, 15 times.
Right.
And yet we know that that's a big part of kind of what we hide from others. And sometimes also it becomes very lonely and isolating because of that. Let's talk a bit about that as well. And how has that also been a part of your experience? And how did you learn to overcome that?
Yeah, it was definitely my experience, because a lot of times, so my background's in HR, I've been in it for 30 years. 10 of those I spent as a top HR executive for different companies. Oftentimes I was the only one who looked like me, or may have been the only female on the executive team. So yeah, it is very lonely. And when you're in HR, employees don't want to be your friends. So you don't have anyone to go to lunch with. And you're not invited to the after hour parties, so you kind of roll through the day really isolated. And so I had to reach and start developing my own network outside of the workplace. And then also find mentors and sponsors who I could be my true authentic self with, bounce ideas off of, ask those questions that maybe I was too intimidated to ask when I was sitting at the table with the executives. And then also I worked with a coach early in my career. So when I moved from being a transactional HR professional to a more strategic HR professional, I needed to know how to bridge that gap. And so working with my coach helped me be able to identify, where my gaps were and then close those pretty quickly.
So let's go back. I think something you said is so interesting and so spot on, and yet there's so much mystery as to why. HR usually as a function is not the most favorite kid on the block. And yet, one would think otherwise, in the sense of HR as a function, as a unit, really being advocates for employees. But as we know, that's traditionally not the case. Right. Talk to us a bit from your perspective and your experience. Why do you think that is?
I think it depends on the individuals that are in HR. That's been my experience. I was really determined when I got into a leadership role, I didn't want to be that HR because I experienced the bad HR before in my career where I didn't feel like they wanted to hear what my issues or concerns were and that they fell on deaf ears and that nothing changed. So I knew I wanted to be something different when I showed up as a manager. And I was just very strategic and intentional when I really started moving up the ladder and having areas of influence and being able to implement change. So I was really more focused on having that delicate balance and being honest with employees and with the managers and the executive team. So really being that true, like they call HR business partner across the entire organization. So although people are intimidated when they have to come to HR, it's like going to the principal's office. That's never a good feeling. But I tried to make them feel comfortable. I tried to help them understand why they were there, especially if it was something that, their manager, had an issue with, and just really tried to understand what their issues were and meet them on a human level, because it is human resources, and get to know the person individually. And I've developed really, really good relationship with employees to this day, even though I'm no longer there. We're still connected and still keep in touch. And sometimes they reach out to me for advice on how to deal with situations. so I guess that means that I made that imprint, and that's what I wanted to do.
I want to come back to the whole theme of corporate work and corporate culture later on in our discussion. But just before we move on, talk about, of course, we all know we're in the middle of a pandemic right now. And my goal is that, in X number of months, in a year, we look back and watch some of our episodes and think, wow, this was really a transformative moment in time. And, for HR as a function, how do you think ideally, right, HR could transform itself to really become more of that human ally to employees, particularly as companies are really just trying to figure out how to make it all work right now?
Right. That's a great question, Jan. And I've been actually maybe insanely excited about this opportunity for HR because I feel like, we talk about frontline employees, essential employees. HR really is that for the organization right now, because not only did we have to help shepherd employees out of the workplace, help them go home, hunker down so they can stay safe. We had to redo policies. We had to redo how we hire, how we recruit, how we manage employees in a virtual world, not to mention embracing technology in ways that we never had before, while also ensuring that our employees felt engaged and motivated and trying to keep that culture, alive in a virtual world. So all of this has been new for me even. And I tell people, we're in HR, we're all learning this all over again, right? So everything we knew about HR, for the most part, is gone. We have to learn how to work and manage in this new world, and also be the gatekeepers for our executives, because they're turning to HR to help them know what can we do, when can we do it, how do we do it, where do we do it? And if we can be on the front of that, what a difference. You're automatically now a strategic business partner if you never have been before. So we can no longer sit back and just be transactional in this world. And to me, that's very, very exciting. So even for people who are just getting into HR or maybe just got to that director level, this is an opportunity really to carve your own path in terms of where you want to take HR in your own career, because we're getting a reset too. And I think it's exciting.
I absolutely agree. When I was back in my corporate days, I would often manage IT and operations and finance and, more of the support function areas as well. And those truly, it was back in that moment in time where they were referred to as support functions, the back office.
Yes.
Right. And I think it's interesting now as we think about, and I love what you said around, how HR can become a true strategic business partner, where it's interwoven into the strategy of the business model itself. Right.
Right.
And I'm wondering, from your perspective, do you also see the DEI function to follow in the same way, where it's not just something that organization knows that it needs to have it, so it checks it off the box and it implements and launches some ERGs and maybe, hosts a few different events and, publishes a few white papers and moves on, but really integrates it into the business strategy. And, we talk a lot about this moment in time being used just for that. But we often know sometimes there's a vast difference between what you say and the action and the implementation of it. Talk to us about what you think is happening in the DEI space right now, and where do you envision it going forward?
Well, much like the original pandemic of coronavirus, I have been talking to clients about racism being the other pandemic that we're dealing with as well. It's always been here, but it was kind of that silent unspoken about topic. People ignored it. If it didn't impact them in one way, shape, or form, they didn't even really have to address it. But now, with George Floyd's death, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, all of these others, countless names that have, been murdered, I think it's really brought it to light. And it was in this particular time that it had to happen. Unfortunate events, but because we were all home, we had no distractions. We're glued to our TVs, our computers. This information is coming at us in warp speed. No one could ignore it. So it was necessary. And now we're dealing with DEI in a way that back in 2007, when I got in this space, is what I thought it was about, right? And then not just about Black employees or African-American employees, but really about all employees having a fair chance to be successful. So I think now companies, the right ones, are really paying attention to where did we go wrong when we said we had D&I and we really didn't? What can we do now under this new lens that will change that scope and that conversation in a way that we've never done it as a company before? Because let's face it, in HR, we tell people don't talk about race, politics, or religion. And now we're talking about race, politics, and religion in society. So everything's thrown out the window. Everything we know is gone. So we're rewriting the handbooks. We're rewriting everything now because we're having these courageous conversations in the workplace, even virtually for the first time. And the conversations I'm having with clients and with different organizations across many, many different industries has been very interesting because I feel like now they are willing to lean into this in a way they never have before and commit to it. So it is part of their DNA. So part of my job is to hold them accountable along the way, but also, giving them permission to have these moments of vulnerability, transparency, authenticity as leaders that they never had before. So it's scary. And I tell people, look, it's scary, it's awkward, it's uncomfortable, but that means it's changing, right?
You talk a lot also about the importance of listening during this period of time. Let's talk a little bit more about that too, on all different sides of the table, right? How is that really important, particularly now in this moment in time?
Yeah, I think, active listening is so key. I talk to people when they ask me, how do I be an ally? What does it mean to be an ally? And I said, well, one of the things you have to do is you have to educate yourself, and then you have to be willing to listen. You have to be able to listen to other people's experiences, not discount them, not compare your experience with theirs, because everyone's different. And then you have to be willing to understand that people come from different experiences as well. So what they may deem as, let's say, racism, someone else may not. So have those conversations in a way that's respectful and is along the lens of wanting to learn. So I've had individuals ask me, well, I have Black friends or Black coworkers or Black employees. I don't know what to say. I'm scared to say anything. I don't want to offend. And I said, well, first, if they know, like, and trust you, then I would hope that they would know you're coming from the right space and that you want to learn what you can do to help or to support or to advocate or to be an ally. And there's going to be a little bit of, hesitation here because it's cautious optimism right now, I'll be honest with you, in the Black community, because we're like, we've heard this before. We've seen this before. Is it really going to change? How do we know it's going to last? Oh, when the hashtags go away or the protesters go back home, how do we know that these conversations are really going to continue? I mean, you see that the news has already switched back to coronavirus, so they're not really talking about the protests that are still happening. So again, we have to kind of keep these conversations alive, but be willing to listen with an empathetic ear. And I tell people it's empathy, not sympathy, with an empathetic ear to both sides of the equation. Now, yes, emotions will run high because people have very strong opinions based on their own experiences. But if you can kind of meet them in the middle, and I tell people you won't bring everyone along at the same time. Some people are going to lag, and some people, in terms of the curve of change, that acceptance level takes a little longer than others. But I think eventually we'll get there, hopefully in my lifetime.
It's interesting. And I'm wondering if this is also, and I absolutely agree with what you're saying, that after the hashtags go away and after, the social media posts turn towards something else, right? So we're seeing a lot of people really come out and be very supportive of intersectionality, of all the social justice issues that are really coming to the forefront right now, and racism obviously being at the front of that list. But I'm also wondering, so when I think back on the 60s and 70s, we had the anti-war, anti-Vietnam War movement, we had the civil rights movement, we had second wave feminism, and there was, of course, some overlap in that, but for the most part, those were siloed in the sense of, although the issues very much were interrelated and intercorrelated, But this is also a very different moment in time where I feel like in the beginning of the pandemic, we were talking about how the pandemic's a great equalizer, right? In the sense of if Tom Hanks can get it, then anyone can get it,
right?
right? Or if leaders of countries can get it, then anyone can get it,
right?
But now we're really seeing the true effects and consequences of inequalities in the United States, and everything from jobs and unemployment to access to insurance and healthcare, and just even if you have insurance, quality healthcare access, to just the differences between what does it look like when you still have to get on a subway and go to work when everyone else is working from home, right? So that's very much cuts across race and class and ethnicity lines, and you see that. Being here in New York City, you see that in a significant way in many other U.S. cities as well. Even from, those ways in which the pandemic's really hit hard, nursing homes, prisons, and meatpacking plants, right? So when you think about, the frontline workers that were affected there. So all of this is now very apparent and very open and very transparent, right?
Yeah.
And, I'm wondering if there is something very different about this moment in time. And I agree that after, the media is a large part of enforcing how this stays of top of mind, and social media as well. But then it also plays out in an election year in the sense of who we really vote for. And I'm wondering, from your perspective, looking at it from the company perspective out, what are some ways that companies can really still continue to hold themselves accountable and hold their employees accountable, and then also employees to be able to hold their companies accountable as well, right? Because you see change happen from the top down and the bottom up as well, right?
Yeah, for sure, Jan. And I think one of the things is, being open in your communications about where you are with diversity and inclusion. So what are your programs? What is your focus? If you are taking on charities, what are those charities? And then be able to account to that on a regular basis, whether it's quarterly. I don't think annual is often enough. I think it needs to be at least quarterly to say, hey, this is what we committed to, back in, let's say, May 2020. Here's where we are. We're not quite there yet, but we want to continue to show our progress. I think tying it to compensation is important. I've seen a lot of companies have done that over the years, and it's made a difference. So when managers are held accountable for making certain that they're diversifying their workforce, when they're hiring, when they're promoting, that's key. Because if you're holding back, let's say 10% of their bonus is geared towards, okay, how well do you do in diversity in your team or in your department or your function, that's going to make a difference, because now they're going to help hold all of their employees underneath them accountable to make sure they meet their goal, right? So all of the the roles are going in the same direction to ultimately get to that end goal. Now, make those goals realistic. Of course, you don't want something that's so large and so unreachable that people aren't motivated to try, but you can always increase it over time. Every 2 years or so, bump the percentages up of who you want to see promoted, how many women, how many people of color, how many people with different abilities, how many LGBTQ plus identified, right? So across the broad spectrum, because I tell my clients, I've had them ask me, when they reach out to me, they're like, well, do we have to hire a certain amount of Black employees? And I said, no, you have to hire the right qualified employees. I'm like, let's start there. Well, we can diversify that talent pool so you have more people to choose from across a rainbow spectrum of people. And I'm not going to say just throw a bunch of Black people in your talent pool. I want to see some in there, but I also want to see LGBTQ. I want to see more women. I want to see more people of color that ultimately we know can be in a succession plan for you. So really identifying what that plan is, communicating that out to your employees, letting them know, hey, by the way, this is tied to our bonus. Not all employees get bonuses. So that means a big deal to them when they see like, oh, you're putting skin in the game now. And obviously you're really going to try and make something different happen here. And then for the employees, when they don't see that action taking place, have a voice. These young employees, these Gen Ys and these Gen Zs, they will talk about you. They will do what they call cancel culture in a minute if you're not true to who you say you are, or sticking to your values, your mission, and what you have deemed and put out there publicly. They will talk about it on social media. They will talk about it to the CEO. They have no fear, which I admire. So I think the employees are going to organically keep the companies accountable.
They'll take a picture of you and post it on Instagram.
Say shame, shame, shame.
Well, that brings up so many really interesting points. From how social media is used during this period of time. We talked a bit about, the hashtag movements and, how those ebb and flow across all social justice causes, to be honest, right? But then, we also know that companies are also trying to figure out how to do it better and in a sustained way. But then companies also use it as a surveillance tactic to figure out what employees are up to too, right? And I know that many employers actually use it as a screening process in the employment consideration flow of things, right? Yep. And so that's often, not just now you're checking your background screens, but you're also checking, what are they posting? What are they talking about? Who are they affiliated with? What are they aligned with? And is that going to change going forward? Like, in what ways do you think if that changes, will that change in a way where companies really, truly do understand kind of the all-encompassing good that can come with employing people that have diverse perspectives?
Yeah, another good question. So oftentimes I coach college students on, getting their first job and what to look out for. So one of the first things I tell them to do is make sure that all their information is private, that it's not searchable. So you can go on Facebook in the settings and say, oh, I don't want my email affiliated in a search for my Facebook page. Most of them aren't on Facebook anymore, but just saying. So, I tell them, keep it private, but on the flip side, when I'm in companies and I'm talking to hiring managers, I tell them, you have to be cautious with what you find out there, because some things you can use against someone to not hire them and it could be deemed discriminatory. So let's say you find out someone's having health issues and you decide, oh, I don't know if I want this person there, they're battling cancer. Well, now we have a health issue and now we have a discrimination issue. Or, now they're doing something that's so egregious that, like, this is not a fit for our culture. We don't want anyone here who's having these racist, comments or, saying these rants on social media that are completely against our policies and procedures. That's a different conversation. I can support that from an HR perspective, say, yeah, you're probably right. We don't want to let that in. So I think you have to be cautious with what you find and then how you use it in your hiring decision. If you can put that blind eye on and say, oh, this person's, fighting cancer. Oh, I hope she makes it, or I hope they do well. Let's hire them because I love their talent, their skill. That's the right way to look at it versus, oh, I don't know if I want that person on my benefits. It's going to make our insurance go up, that kind of thing. No, we don't want to have that. So, I warn employees about keeping their stuff private. And then for the companies, I warn them, yeah, it's okay to search. I know I can't stop you. They're going to do it anyway. People Google me all the time and I'm okay with it. But I tell them, just make certain that you're not using something that could be deemed discriminatory as a reason why you don't bring them in for the interview or why you don't hire them.
So interesting, because I would imagine that, some of the wearable technologies that we all embraced pre-COVID, the Fitbits and some of the other tracking devices, right? And even, the way in which, anyone can literally find this on their cell phones now. Mm-hmm. Is there a heightened level of concern that just we as employees or employers should keep in mind? Because now if we're working in a world where, a requisite for getting into the building may be having temperatures checked, right? And I would assume that, the wearable market will become even more relevant as we're self-monitoring our own health, but then monitoring the health of our team members as well. And, I remember with Fitbits, it's, if it's a company-sponsored program, then, technically the company owns that data on you that they're collecting, right? And so it reminded me when you were speaking about, and the point that you just raised, kind of the dangers of, wanting to make sure that that's balanced, where you're protecting your employees, providing a really safe working place, because now safety just isn't, ensuring that doors are locked at night, but it's also ensuring just the physical safety and health of people. And so let's talk a bit about kind of that delicate balance.
Yeah, so a lot of my clients are concerned about that, right? Because now we're taking temperatures of employees. It's very much in public view. So the question is, okay, well, if we take someone's temperature and their temperature is 102 and we send them home, now everyone that saw that happen is going to know this person has been sent home because of their temperature. And then they're going to make all these assumptions and be, concerned and coming to HR or talking to someone in HR. Oh, I was in contact with that person. What do I do? Do I need to go get tested? That kind of thing. So I think it's so fluid right now, Jan, that we're all trying to figure it out. So yes, the primary concern and focus really is the safety of all employees. So if the employer is not doing it, if you have security in your building, security might be doing it, right? So ultimately, I think we're going to see this practice happen for a while. And now the laws are going to have to keep up with it. So HIPAA laws are going to have to keep up with it because that's protecting the health information about your employees. I've told my clients, don't have that information in public view. Like one company wanted to have just a sign-in sheet and put a check if the person, I was like, no, you can't do that because everyone who signs in is going to see the person before them. I was like, can't do that. We got to come up with a better way. And I was like, do it through email, let it go straight to HR, those types of things. So I think everyone's just trying to figure it out and be as efficient and effective as they can while also worrying about the concerns and the health of their employees, especially as we start bringing people back to the workplace. So yeah, it's tricky. And, with the Fitbits, the ones that are, provided by companies, from my understanding, the equipment is the company's, but the information belongs to the health insurance or whoever is monitoring that. So it should still be private. Again, with HIPAA laws, it should still be private where the CEO doesn't see it. Maybe someone in HR sees it because they're the keeper of all this, intimate information about the employees, but it shouldn't be something that's so broadcast that everybody sees it. Now, I've seen some where people are in groups and they can keep up with, how many steps someone took or their heart rate and even like weight or something like that, because they had like this Biggest Loser contest going on, but they all agreed to it, right? So they all agreed to it going in. They knew that this information would be shared amongst the team. So again, you just have to kind of be cognizant of that and then who has access to it and what they're doing with that information. That's what's important.
And then who's gained the COVID-15 during COVID-19?
It's a battle we're all fighting, Jan.
I want to turn the conversation a bit and just talk about employment at a more macro level. And we know that I've lost track. Is it 46, 47, 48 million Americans have filed unemployment at some point during this pandemic? And I always equate it to what happened in 2007, 2008, although this is on a much more massive scale. In 2007, 2008, particularly for women over a certain age, many of us were a part of a massive layoff, right? That really impacted, hundreds of thousands of people. But, wondering, are there lessons from 2007, 2008 that you're learning with your clients now, particularly as many of those women did not go back to the corporate sector, right? Instead, they launched entrepreneurial businesses or they became business owners or, whatever the case was, or they became investors or funders themselves too. And I would assume that that's also happening during this period of time and will continue to do so, particularly as many industries have to really transform and revolutionize how they're doing work. Right. And so that creates a lot of opportunities for acquiring new skills. But then for many of us, particularly for women over a certain age, and I want to hear, your perspective on this as well, in the sense of the trends that you see happening.
Yeah, I think, companies this time around have been much more empathetic is what I see, because I lived through, 07, 08, 09 as well. I wasn't negatively impacted, but I was in HR and I saw what was happening to my colleagues, my friends, my family members. And it just felt like a big Band-Aid had been ripped off. Whereas here, I feel like we're putting salve on a wound. We're doing skin grafting. We're doing everything we have to do not to rip that Band-Aid off, but in a good way, because I think that because it's probably such a big health issue, not versus like a financial issue, right? I think this is such a health issue, and the way it happened so suddenly, everyone's like, we had the whole hashtag, we're all in this together. And I think organizations were at the front of that to say, hey, we're going to wrap our arms around our employees. We're not going to furlough if we don't have to. We're going to try and keep everyone on payroll as long as we can. And for those who didn't, they went out and they were able to get, the loans and the funding from the government to try and extend how long they can keep their employees on payroll. Now that funding, that requirement ends in September 30th. And I'm seeing people like airlines and some other companies already saying as of October 1, they will have to lay people off and do furloughs, which is unfortunate. But again, I think they've held in there for so long that I have to commend them, because I can only imagine how this is going to look at the end of the year financially for them. But they wanted to do the right thing by their employees. So yes, I think that this is definitely a different feel to it in terms of emotional and just where people are trying to help each other than 2007 and 08. But I also feel that at the end of the day, yes, we're going to see that as an outcome. We're going to see more people on unemployment. We're going to see more entrepreneurs come out of this, I hope. I know a lot of people are looking at, do I even want to go back to that company? I have people who, my clients, have resigned because they say, after staying home for 4 months, I don't think this is what I want to do anymore. And I told I tell my clients, I say, bless them and let them go. I said, A, you don't want that anymore. You want to be able to get someone in who wants to be there. I said, and B, who knows how they're going to change the world, what business they're going to come out with that all of us might benefit from one day. I mean, back in '08, that's when we got Uber and Lyft and Postmates and all of those companies that now we can't live without. So I'm like, let them go make magic somewhere.
Bring back Rent the Runway.
Exactly. I have to just walk around my house in a gown. To be fabulous for no reason.
See, that's a Zoom party right there. Yes. 50 women get together.
That's right.
Spend 30 minutes shopping on guilt.com and see what happens.
That's right. That's right.
You talk a lot about how Black women are the highest and largest group of educated employees in the workforce. And yet during 2007, 2008, 2009, we saw a high percentage of them leave their corporate jobs and launch their own ventures. And we also know that going through that experience can be very lonely and isolating, particularly when you feel like it's only happening to you.
Yes.
Let's talk about how we often internalize that and often don't feel like we have the safe spaces to be able to talk to other women about that, and how in Black communities has that really impacted Black women.
Yeah, it's definitely impacted us. I can speak from my own experience and those of others who I spent plenty of time talking to. But yeah, we do have the imposter syndrome kicks in. I'll talk about that again, because you feel like, okay, why am I the only one here? Do I really belong here? And then you just kind of get inside your own head. And oftentimes it's hard to really stand in your true power as a result of that and really own this position or this role or this title that you have, because you're always wondering somewhere in the back of your mind, do I really belong here? Because there's no one else who looks like me. Then you also have the extra burden of being the only one there and everyone else looking to you to say, oh, save us, bring us along, help us. And sometimes you can't. You're not in a position to do that. Or it's a very slow process for you to get the power to be able to do that, because the barriers that are there, sometimes self-imposed, sometimes real, stop you from feeling that you can make the changes that need to happen to bring others along who look like you, who are or who are also marginalized. So it is a very difficult position to be in, and it is challenging. And that is why a lot of Black women have left corporate and started their own businesses, because they reached those walls, a concrete wall, and weren't able to get past it. They didn't have the support system. They didn't have the sponsors, the mentors internally that could open doors for them, that could put their names in the right room so that they can get those promotions that they know they well deserve and have the tons of experience in order to be able to be successful in. But then they'll see someone behind them skip over them, or they'll see someone that is not Black get hired for that role, and then they have to train them. So that's a stinging, right? So all of these things just kind of, and again, speaking from my own experience, all of these things just really start to pile on, all these microaggressions, and then you get to the point where you're like, you know what? It's not worth it. I'm not going to fight anymore. I'm done. And then you end up leaving and you start your own business. I mean, that's exactly why I left corporate 6 years ago. Exactly why.
Let's piggyback on that and dive a little bit deeper into this as well, particularly in this moment in time, right? And so we're all, for the most part, not in a physical workspace together, right? And so let's talk about, from the company, through the company lens, like in this moment in time, what could companies be doing differently this time around? And we talked a little bit before about, the empathy factor and, coming to where employees are during this period of time, and expanding how we think about incorporating in DEI and HR into the business model itself of a company. But what else, given the sense that we're not, it's the way in which we're interacting with human beings now is very different.
Yes.
Right. And I'm sure that there's also other things that companies can do to really, give recognition and, everything from an informal shout out to, something that actually ensures that people really feel valued and respected and honored and, awarded in ways that they want to be, all of those things.
Yeah. And, I talked to a group of women about this because they were concerned as well, right? Because now they're home and they're responsible, primarily responsible for the kids when they were in school for homeschooling. They're like, hey, I couldn't make this meeting. I feel bad. But it was, my kid had to do an assignment for school, or I needed to get lunch ready so that they can, have something to eat. And I wasn't able to participate as long as I needed to in the meeting. So women and women of color, I think, are one of the ones that are most affected by being at home, because a lot of the burden falls on them in terms of the upkeep of the home and taking care of the kids. And now they're in summer and they don't have summer camp or day camp or daycare or anything, right? So again, it's a ripple effect. So I think what organizations have to do is understand what this means in terms of what this new work life is like for people. So they need to be able to have some flexibility and ensure that these people are still involved in key projects, that they have a voice at the table in these virtual meetings, that they have a piece of the agenda. So that way they're presenting to people maybe they wouldn't ordinarily get to present to if they were in the office, and also have an opportunity to show their skill set, their experience, and be able to take on new experiences that will help them grow and develop, and ultimately align them for promotions. Because I had someone say, well, are people taking vacations and getting promoted during, yes, you're still working. Of course you are. It's just in a different model. That's all. But, just helping organizations understand how that should look and feel, and then having employees feel confident enough to say, hey, just because you're behind a screen, don't lose that connection or that level of engagement. But if you need to have some flexibility on day because now your life has changed as a result of being home all day and not having options for your children, be honest with your manager about that. Don't wait until it's a problem and then they have to bring it to you. Have that proactive communication with them in advance. So that way they're like, oh yeah, 12 o'clock team meeting, not going to work. Let's make it 2, that kind of thing.
I really appreciate what you just said, because I think sometimes as women, we try to say yes to everything.
Yes.
Without understanding that we can also agree to say no to certain things as well, right, so that we're all not feeling like we need to constantly be put upon ourselves.
Right.
And the reason why I mentioned that too is that, I think self-care, which is such an overused phrase right now, but it's really important. And particularly, given the sense of, you mentioned, yes, we're in summer, who knew? But, many of us are canceling vacation plans and canceling, family activities and activities with friends and colleagues and everything that we'd be doing normally during the summer months. The summer happy hour, where went that?
Brunch.
Brunch, what? But I would imagine that, this is also a period of time for women to really give themselves permission to just be okay with using a part of this time to really, truly hone in on who they want to be when they grow up, right? Who do we really want to be on the other side of this when we grow up?
I love that. Yeah, you're so right. Yeah, self-care, it's a buzzword, right? It's like another hashtag, but it's so important. And I tell my clients, no is a complete sentence. You don't have to explain it. Now in the workplace, you may have to say, I need some flexibility and here's why. Again, just having those open, honest communications. The thing is, Jan, so I tell people it's like this. The workplace came uninvited into my home. So now you're going to have to work with me here. You're here now. You're in my space. And oh, by the way, I have other duties that I take care of when I'm usually at work. I don't have to, but now I'm here working and I have to take care of these things. So let's come up with some sort of agreement that is feasible and workable for everyone. But that won't penalize me in a way where when I'm sitting down having my performance review in 6 months, I don't get the raise that I should be entitled to. I don't get the promotion I should be entitled to, or the bonus that I should be entitled to, because you want to have all these tick marks against me for the meetings I missed, or the fact that I was late, or I had to leave early. That's just not right. So I think people, again, organizations need to look at this differently. I tell people it's not managing in the same way as in the workplace. And I think we're also getting to know each other on a level that we never have before. I mean, when else would someone be able to see my home, to be able to see my kids in the background, or my pet walk across the computer, these types of things. So I think it's also, it's an interesting time, because I'm hoping when people do eventually go back to the workplace, that this new connection on a human level continues when we're back in person, and that we don't go back to the old way of doing things and an old way of managing people. Manage people as humans, meet them where they are, and you'll get way more out of them.
It's such a good point. I really love what you just said, because there's something about, even though we're in a very flat world right now, But you're absolutely right. There's something much more humanizing about us. Like I see your background, you see my background. We have these little Zoom squares now that we're all, these really have become our calling cards. And I think that there's also a level of perfection that we all strove for before.
Right.
It's not realistic right now, right? Like Wi-Fi connections go down sometimes. Sometimes the kids run into the room. Sometimes we forget that, we may be wearing our Zoom top on top, but maybe not on bottom.
I've seen some of those.
And so there's this level of imperfection that I hope that we also don't go back to, right? And giving ourselves permission to really think about, who do we really, also honestly, who do we want to have in our lives going forward as well, right? And I hear from many women in the Mayshad ecosystem that they're also using this time to really think about like, what kind of energy do you want to surround yourself with? And given the fact that like we're still all going through this in very different ways, right? So people are still getting sick, people are still dying, people are still losing their jobs. And as much as we'd like to be very positive about like all the good things that are coming from this, and many of those things you and I just talked about, we know that we're all kind of in this in a different moment and place, and that's going to happen for quite some time. And so, what you mentioned about the performance reviews, I think is really interesting. I want to talk a little bit more about that as well, because I think that, you're absolutely right in the sense of my fear in that when companies do go back to a physical office is that look like many states and towns and cities are announcing that kids are not going to go back to school in the fall, right? That remote learning is going to continue to be a thing. And so as much as that becomes a political debate, it's also the reality of the fact that there are people who are going to be in the physical workspace and people who are at home. And, based upon what you're saying, which I absolutely agree with, like the majority of people in traditional heterosexual relationships, it's going to be a woman who actually stays at home, not exclusively, but for the most part, it's, we know the data is showing you're right that the majority of parents that are homeschooling are actually women, right? And so how, from your perspective, ideally would the performance appraisal process change, knowing that, in the sense of, all the things that you mentioned, that there's going to have to be much more flexibility and tolerance and empathy around understanding that we're all not going to be able to be at that same meeting, and then the division between who's in the office and who isn't in the office, and how then larger business decisions are made, who's going to be excluded from those conversations.
Yeah, again, it's going to be a work in progress. And I think that what one of my clients did was they said they're only going to look at the first half of the year for performance reviews, and they're not really going to consider anything from that point on because it's so unpredictable and so fluid. They don't know if they're going to be back in the office. They don't know when they'll be back in the office or who will be back in the office. So they said, you know what, we kind of hung in there for the first 6 months of the year. We did as best we could in terms of reaching our goals as a company and as individuals. And at the end of the year, when we look at these reviews in November, December, we're only going to look at the first half of the year. And I commend them for that. I think that's fair. I think it's fair to the employees. It takes a lot of pressure off. Now, that doesn't say that you can start slacking for the last 6 months. You still have to, still have to do your job, still have to perform. But in terms of like reaching those certain goals that they set, because they have some, pretty strong goals for the employees, they're production based, they're only going to look at those first 6 months. So I think that's fair. And I think that, again, you still have to manage performance. One of my clients, we've terminated 2 people during this process because they weren't performing before COVID. We gave them a little leeway. So we had them on a performance improvement plan for 30 days. We extended it for 60 just to say, okay, well, let's give them extra 30 days to adapt to this new world and see how they do. Maybe they'll do better at working at home. Well, they didn't. Same issues persisted. Okay, now we know we have to transition them on to a new life. So we did that. And we did it effectively and efficiently and respectfully over Zoom. And, had everything shipped back and sanitized and put everything back into inventory in terms of their laptop and peripherals. But, you have to still continue to manage, right? So I'm not telling people to slack off, and I'm not telling companies to say, don't worry about performance. It's okay. Just give everybody the same increase. I don't agree in that either. I think there does need to be some meritocracy, but then there also needs to be, it needs to be fair and equitable across the board.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You talk extensively about what it means to own your power, your worth, your healing, and your destiny. And in this moment in time, for you, what does this particularly mean?
For me, wow. So I've had to pivot my entire business because I spend a lot of my time on the road and, doing speaking engagements and trainings for companies. And in March, of course, all of that came to a screeching halt. And I remember at the time thinking, oh my goodness, the whole plan I had for my business this year is out the window. I went into 2020 so optimistic. I was telling everyone, this is Perfect Vision 2020. I can't wait. And I was like promoting it all over social media. And then 8 weeks in is like a whole new world. So I had to think about, who do I want to be as an entrepreneur in this new world? Who do I want to be as a consultant in this new world? How can I best serve my clients? And that meant I had to educate myself. So I spent probably the first 6 weeks on so many webinars back to back, just understanding, how is COVID impacting the workplace? What does it mean to get people out of the workplace? What are the health issues that we need to worry about? Again, through an HR lens, and then sharing that information with my clients, and then helping them rewrite work from home policies, telecommute policies, their handbook around PTO uses, all of these different things that, again, was set in stone, didn't have to worry about them. And now we're rewriting handbooks. So, being on the front end of that and saying, okay, now we got that part done. Now let's deal with the employees. What do you need at home? Do you need something to set you up ergonomically? What is your workspace like? Are you comfortable? Do you need monitors? Okay, now let's take care of that. Okay, now great. Now let's work with the leadership team to talk about, okay, now how's this going to impact the goals that you have for the company? Are we going to have to do layoffs or furloughs? And if so, when, who? And just kind of going through that, right? So it's just kind of like, really, it changed the dynamic of my business, and that's helped me to really lean into who I am as an entrepreneur and as an HR professional. And then now looking at it through a diversity and inclusion lens. So a whole new set of clients came as a result of that. Getting to know these different businesses, guiding them through these courageous conversations with their employees, starting with the leadership team, and then now designing diversity and inclusion strategies, tearing down what they had before because it wasn't working. Once they looked around, it was like, yeah, that didn't work out so well. we need a reset. Okay, let's reset. So having these conversations and giving them, some actionable items to help kind of move them along their own track. Each one is different, but that's really what's been keeping me focused, keeping me busy, helping me grow as an individual and as an entrepreneur. And I'm still educating myself. I got 2 certificates during this time, one from Yale, one from Cornell, just to keep the brain, moving and going. Reading a lot of articles and just staying informed as much as possible, attending different webinars as well with other professionals, just to kind of get their lens and their perspective on things and little nuggets of stuff I can take back to use with my clients. So that's really been key for me. So that's really what I've been using to really stay focused and owning my power, my truth, my healing, my worth, and my destiny.
So you've been incredibly busy. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Here's a question for you. For the clients that you work with, what are a couple of their biggest aha moments? Because you had mentioned that, oh yes, once we started thinking about this, we were realizing that things weren't working.
Yeah.
Right. And so this is all giving us a moment in time to really step back and assess and reflect, where, it could have been not just like
an awakening.
I want to say this. Yeah, an awakening, but something that was like so blatant. Like, why didn't we see this happening before? Right. And so now it's here.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's definitely an aha something. But I'm wondering if there are other aha lessons, both for your clients and actually for yourself, that you've experienced during this time.
Yeah, one of the things that I find a little comical to me is when the CEO reaches out to me or someone from HR reaches out to me, and I have my first meeting with the executive team virtually, and they'll say, we didn't realize everyone on the team was white. I was like, how could you not? And I kind of chuckle, and I'm like, it's not the first time I've heard that. It's okay. They're like a little timid and embarrassed by it, right? And I said, it's okay. It's a safe space. Let's talk. And I'm like, how do you think that happened? How did you hire it? Oh, well, I reached out to a friend, or someone referred someone. And I said, okay, think about 90% of the people that you spend most of your time with outside of your family. Do they look like you? They usually nod their head yes. And I said, that's why everyone around the table is white. I said, it's like, it starts with one person, and then it's like, the cycle around. So when they have that visual, they're like, okay, so we're not bad people. I'm like, no, you're not bad people. You did what was perfectly normal as you were building your business or building your team. But now we're going to diversify that, and we're going to be intentional about it. So that to me has been the biggest aha moment, that each and every one of them, and I've talked to over 30 companies in the last month and a half. And they all had this awakening, like, how did this happen?
So, question for you. This is fascinating, and I'm wondering, for many companies, and I've seen this happen in everything from entrepreneurs in the sense of when they go out and try to raise capital,
yeah,
right? And we know that across the country, only 4% of VCs are women, right? So that means, not very many female-funded companies get funding, because you're absolutely right in the sense of like attracts like. And we know that, there's obviously we have diversity problems at all different levels of an organization. When companies say, we try, but we just can't find diverse candidates, diverse entrepreneurs, diverse companies, what's your response to that?
I tell them we're hiding in plain sight. I said, we're everywhere, just like you. How can you not find us? You don't see us. Let's say you don't see us. Don't say you can't find us, right? And so that's where I do a little bit of pushback and a little bit of let's have a real conversation here, because I want to know, where do you look? If you look in the same pond, you'll get the same fish. Right. So now let's diversify where you are fishing from, and you got to be intentional. And oh, by the way, that means when you're hiring, your hiring process is probably going to slow down. So let's build that into your process early on so we can manage hiring managers' expectations. You're not going to get a butt in the seat in 6 weeks. It might take 12, because we're being more intentional. We want to diversify the pool. We want to make sure that, we're not having our own bias around whose resumes when we're looking at resumes and applications. So that's going to take some time and being intentional. And once you do that and you start seeing like, oh, the lens is starting, the scope here is starting to change. This is what we said we wanted. And I told them it's a marathon, not a sprint. So just don't think that you're going to hit a switch and everything's going to change overnight. No, not going to happen. Even with the leadership team, some are further along that curve than you are, and some are not there yet. It's going to take some time. And then some are just not going to get there. And you got to decide, are they really part of this team? Should they be? That's another conversation we have to have too. So I think it's like, when they say that to me, I just find it, again, comical, because I'm like, here I am. You found me. How'd you find me? And they're like, oh, well, so-and-so referred so-and-so. Okay, so we're here.
Let's talk about your new book.
Yes.
Working While Black, A Woman's Guide to Stop Being the Best Kept Secret. You'd mentioned that Dr. Lois Frankel, who I also adore, who have we not read a gazillion times, Nice Girls Don't Get the Corner Office.
That's
she also wrote Nice Girls Don't Get Rich, which I love that one too, and Nice Girls Just Don't Get It.
That's You get a theme here? Got to be a mean girl. No.
What about her work? And this, just now that we're laughing about this, this seems like a ridiculous question, but what about her work really inspired you to write your book?
She inspired me, actually. She personally challenged me to do it. So she said that she felt that her books were great, and they are, right? We've all read them, as you said, as we grew our career, our businesses. But she said what would happen is when she would go and do speaking engagements or book signings, Black women would come and ask her questions that she didn't have the answers for. She said, honestly, Tana, that wasn't my experience. So I can give them some tools, but those tools may not work for them. So they need someone that can speak to them, from that experience, and also provide tools that work for Black women, because what works for white women may not work for Black women. And she was very fair and honest about that. So she challenged me to kind of share my story, because I know her personally and I've sat on the board of her organization. And so we talked about it over a couple of months. And then finally I started writing it. And she was willing to write the foreword for the book. After she read it, she's like, Tana, this is spot on. This is so good. I learned some things, which is great. And she said, so I can't wait to see where this book goes. I hope it goes even beyond Nice Girls, the whole series. And I was like, well, I hope so too. That'd be great. Because she's like a 3 or 4 times New York Times bestselling author.
What did you learn about yourself during the writing process?
That I've healed. I experienced a lot of trauma in corporate world, and I carried it with me to every single job, and it showed up in different ways. But it was cathartic, but it was also reassuring to know, God, that doesn't bother me like it did before. I've moved so far beyond it. The power that those situations or even those individuals had over me are so far in my rearview mirror. But if they can help benefit someone else who may be sitting in that same seat, to say, you know what? You don't have to put up with this. You don't have to stay. There's something better on the other side of this. Or go have that courageous conversation, because I didn't. I was too afraid. And if I had, things probably would have been a lot different, especially in the world that we live in now. It's much different than when I started my career. But yeah, that's really been the biggest thing for me. that I've healed.
It's interesting that we often say, what advice would you give to your 16-year-old self, or what advice would you give to the next generation, which is, millennials. And now a lot of millennials are turning 40.
Yeah.
So what advice do you give to Gen Zs? But I'm going to turn that a bit and ask you, for Gen X women and baby boomer women, what advice do you have for them?
Again, I would just say it's about leaning into your own power. We all have things that we've experienced in our lifetime, but I don't, like Oprah says, there are no accidents. I think they're all to drive us to where we need to go. Some people get there faster than others. When I think about my own entrepreneurial journey, it was scary. I was not certain if it was what I should do. But every single day I had to learn how to bet on myself and just believe in myself. And I'm glad I did, because, here I am now 6 years into my business, and I'm so glad I didn't give up on myself, 2 years ago when I thought about it, or when a job offer came to me last year, a really nice one. And I said, I don't think this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm just going to stay the course. So I think for Gen X and boomer women, again, yes, it's important for us to pass our experience and knowledge on to the next generation and make it easier for them so they can stand on our shoulders. But also stand in your own power and embrace that where you are in your own life, in your own part of your career or your business. And just know that, again, there are no accidents, even when things are getting tough. It's really helping you build up that courage, that muscle that you need to get you to the next level.
That's such great advice. And I'm also wondering, during this period of time where many women have been furloughed and laid off, and, we talked earlier in our conversation about how millions more will be laid off between now and the end of the year too. For those individuals out there, women and men, who feel like there's no possibility to reinvent because what they've been doing, if you're an X or a boomer, you more than likely have been doing it for many, many decades, right?
Yeah.
And so, in what ways is it helpful for us to learn how to get out of our own way to be able to use this time to really think about, okay, if I need to reinvent my career, if my industry is changing so dramatically, how do I tap into what really is inside me to create something new for myself? And how do I even, go about identifying what's in me?
Yeah, all good questions. So I have my clients, when I'm doing my performance coaching, I have them do an exercise where I tell them to just write on a piece of paper what they want their life to look like, with no boundaries, no financial boundaries, no educational boundaries, no access boundaries. What does that look like? Because it allows us to dream. And a lot of times when we're Gen X and boomers, we stop dreaming because we got stuck in a rut, or we got stuck in life, or we got comfortable, right? So this is just to kind of help them get out of that comfort, out of that box, and think so far outside the box in ways that they never have, probably in a very long time. Much like when they tell people to use, adults to use coloring books for therapy, right? It's like something we haven't done in a while. We go back and we realize how good we were. So I think that's going to be one way to kind of tap into kind of who you really are at your core, right? Because that's your dreams coming to life. You're giving them life now that you're writing them down, you're looking at them, you're seeing them, versus just holding them trapped inside. And then think about what pieces of that life can you really work towards now? Because there's something there. You just have to give yourself permission to believe it, and then to actually take some action towards it. Now, that may mean that you have to take a course. Like I said, I took 2 free courses from Yale and Cornell. Probably would not have been able to do that 6 months ago, but they opened up their catalog and their library of courses for us to take stuff for free, right? So it's all types of things that you can do out there now for free. Companies have opened up, including Microsoft, they've opened up courses like they never have before. I think LinkedIn has as well. So we can help fill some of the gaps that we have, because, we got comfortable. Maybe we've been in that job or that company for a long time, and now we have to make this sudden pivot. Well, if you plan accordingly, kind of educate yourself along the way and take those little micro steps to move in the next direction, before you know it, a year goes by, you're like, wow, I remember a year ago I was struggling. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't know who I was going to be when I grew up. And now look at me, right?
I love the practical tips and advice. Thank you for that.
Sure.
In the closing minutes of our show today, we actually have questions from our Mayshad mentees.
Oh.
And this summer we're running an menteeship program for women from across the country who want to be a part of creating new and exciting things for how women support each other at all different levels of their career and all different ages. So our mentees did quite a bit of research on you.
Uh-oh.
And and came up with some really amazing questions. I want to give a shout out.
They scare me.
I know. I want to first give a shout out to Tess and Sharmi for thanking them for being a part of this show today.
Right.
First question for you is, what advice do you have to give to other women who have yet to write their first book?
Oh, wow. I think about what you want to share with the world, right? And sometimes thinking about it from that perspective could be too large. Think about it if you were just sitting across the table and you want to tell a story to a friend. What do you want that story to be? And that could be fiction or nonfiction. It could be an anthology, autobiography. And then, start writing an outline. So that's where I have to always start with my books, is just start an outline and then start writing, right? And just write. Don't worry about pronunciation. Don't worry about grammar. Just write. Let it flow, because once you start writing, it's going to come. And if you get stuck on, oh, I forgot to put a period here, or I need to capitalize this word. No, just write. Just write. Because when it's your story, there are no rules. A publisher will take care of the rules, or an editor will take care of the rules. Your job is just to write.
So is your advice to women not be so perfect all the time?
Don't be so perfect. You should see my rough drafts.
Next question. What is your advice for rising leaders in fields of HR and DEI, and for those of us who may want to enter into those fields after graduation?
Oh, good questions. A woman after my own heart. So I would say find someone who is in that space already and try to latch onto them as a mentor. That was the biggest thing for me. I started out as an admin assistant in HR, and luckily my boss became my mentor for about 20 years, to the point where I actually reached the same level she did. And then we were just friends at that point, and still mentoring each other, honestly. But I think finding a mentor and then deciding what part of HR do you think you're really keenly interested in, and do a deep dive, become a subject matter expert in that area, because it's so broad. You can have payroll, you can have finance, benefits, you can have employee relations. So many different things, recruiting. So there's a piece of it that really you find that you're really passionate about or very interested in, then do a deep dive into that. And then with diversity and inclusion, again, it's so broad. You want to try and find someone maybe that has been doing it for a while, who can kind of tell you the history of it and then where it's going next, right? Because again, it's evolving as well as a result of where we are right now.
In the early stages of your career, did you know ultimately what you wanted to do?
I didn't. I sure didn't. I knew one day I wanted to have my boss's job. That's all I knew. So to the point where I used to almost dress like her. So, it's funny because like I said, I was her admin assistant, and she's the one who took an interest in me in terms of having me become interested in HR. She just saw something in me, and she said, I think you're really good with people. Everyone seems to like you. You have a great personality. So you might want to consider a career in HR. And at the time, I didn't even have a degree. So I thought it was so far away that I could never achieve it. But ultimately, I just started kind of getting more and more interested and doing more things like helping with orientation and helping give tests to the administrative assistants that were coming into the company, those types of things. And I started getting more interested to see, oh, this person got hired. And I remember when she got hired and now she got promoted and now she's moving here. And I was like, wow, I was a part of that. Like, I want to do more of that. And so ultimately, that's what made me decide I wanted to be the head of HR.
I love that. Love that story. Let's clarify also for our viewers today, your understanding and perception and experience with what does it mean to be a good mentor versus what does it mean to be an effective sponsor?
Yeah. So for me, a mentor is someone that is going to be with you regardless to where you work, regardless to where you are in your career, right? So they're going to be someone that you can continually bounce ideas off of. They have a good idea of who you are on a vulnerable side. You can be transparent with them, honest, and they can be honest with you, right? So they're going to turn the mirror around on you. Whereas a sponsor is someone who's within that company, and they are going to be the ones that are going to say your names around the right table. They're going to be the ones that make certain that the right doors and opportunities are being open for you within that organization. They are a gatekeeper, and they're someone who has power and influence. So there's definitely a difference, because your sponsor is going to be someone that, is probably temporary. They're right there in the organization. They probably won't be with you throughout your whole career. Whereas your mentor, they should be. You should have a very deep relationship with them, sustainable relationship with them, and a very authentic relationship with them, because that's the only way they can really help you.
I love the distinction between the internal and the external, right? In the sense of, the sponsor really within the company, really advocating for you on your behalf and helping you be seen
Yep.
in those spaces and places where you can't be seen.
Right.
And I think for women, no matter if we're a part of a corporate structure or we're launching our own business or we have launched our business, but we're also helping to grow and scale or reinvent during this period of time, being front and center in how you're seen and heard and remembered is going to be more important now than ever. Right?
Absolutely.
And are there other tips or helpful hints that you have for how we can continue to think about all the various ways in which we can be seen even more?
I think networking is going to be key. People think they can't network virtually, but you can. You can, even if you have to develop your own networking group, right? So, whether you start on LinkedIn or just start, inviting people from different industries that to come together and network with one another, maybe do virtual happy hours or something to that effect. The same way we would if we were, able to see each other in person. So I think that's going to be important, is to continue to do that. So that way you learn about hidden opportunities. You get in front of people you probably ordinarily wouldn't. As a result of it, the fact it's virtual, now you can bring people from around the country together. My goodness, what a great opportunity that is. And just really take advantage of where we are right now. I think it's going to take some courage to do it. Sometimes reaching out to people you may think, oh, they probably won't even respond. But guess what? Everybody's home. Everybody has a lot more time than they used to, and they probably will respond.
It's so true. And that's, exactly what we've done at Join Mayshad as well, in the sense of understanding that, women are coming to our network, particularly now, for many different reasons. Whereas last year, we loved the live events. We loved getting together and, having cocktails and appetizers and hosting accomplished women on a stage and, really networking in that very personalized way. But now what we're realizing is you're exactly right. Like, we're connecting with women around the world right now who are really looking for, something different in the sense of what networking means and how can you connect with women that are really diverse across professional and personal experience, diverse across industry, across job function. And I really think that no matter what world we go into, because we're not going back to anything that resembled the past, but that this stays a part of it, because I do absolutely agree, and we touched upon this many times in this conversation, that there's something much more, I think, authentic and real and genuine when we don't have to be perfect 24/7.
That's right. The waist up.
The waist up.
Exactly. I don't have to wear pumps. I don't have to wear, high heel stilettos.
And I think my bunions are actually starting to heal.
Like, I hope they still fit. I don't know the last time I wore a pair of heels.
So true. Mm-hmm. But hey, we should all get together and put on our fancy gowns and trade around for each other. That'd be an occasion to wear a pump.
That's right.
Well, it's been so amazing having you here with us today. How do we stay in contact with you? How would you like our viewers to stay in contact and to reach out and to learn more about potentially working with you?
Yeah, I would love for them to. I'm always looking for more connections on LinkedIn. You can always follow me on all social media platforms. I'm everywhere at Dr. Tana M Session. That's TANA M for Marie, SESSION, no S at the end. And then you can also visit my website, tanamsession.com. And you'll find out all about the programs, the different types of consulting, the different types of diversity and inclusion work I do, as well as information on when my book will officially be released, as well as the other books that I've written as well. And
we would love to have you back even before that happens, because it's such a great conversation. I know that you and I could talk for hours, but I know that our show producer probably won't like that. Tana, thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you, all of you out there who are watching us as well. Please make sure to visit us at joinmayshad.com, where you can learn about all of our training programming and how you too can become a member of Mayshad. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day.